Americans have read it. What is something non-Americans will never get? If you or a loved one has been diagnosed with mesothelioma, you may be entitled to compensation. Root beer. Almost every foreigner will just say it tastes like toothpaste. I gotta get me some European toothpaste. The game were those fireworks or gunshots? Hey, some people try hunting with fireworks. IT's my money and I need IT now. Call JG Wentworth. 877 cash now. I've heard a Canadian rant about the fact that we often say MHM as a response to thank you instead of you're welcome. He thought of it as snobby and rude when in reality it is the equivalent of saying of course. Brit abroad. I once saw Walmart selling a frozen turkey with a 6-pack of Miller Lite, I think, taped around it as some kind of Super Bowl special or something. I'm not one for generalization, but that one made me chuckle. The sheer vast size and the lack of trains. I had a friend from England get all excited about coming to visit America because he thought he would be able to tour around and visit all of his American online friends. I felt so bad telling him that driving from California to Georgia isn't exactly a day trip. My GF has a lab mate from the Netherlands who said he wanted to take his family from Wisconsin to Montana to see the mountains. It shouldn't be a long trip. It's basically one road the whole way. That road is Interstate 90, and it is the longest interstate in the US at just under 5,000 kilometers end to end. Don't worry though, Wisconsin to W. Montana is only a measly half that. This applies to really every group of people, but it still isn't understood somehow that there are plenty of rational Americans who are no different than anyone else in the world who stays informed with the events in the world. The American stereotypes and outliers make the news and movies. The normal ones just live their lives anonymously. American living in Europe. Apparently peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. It blows my co-workers' minds why anyone would eat that. Meanwhile they're eating butter and jelly sandwiches like that's not weird. How amazing true barbecue over a smoker is. Top tier brisket is honestly one of the best foods known to mankind. Smoked pulled pork is the only food that can make my mouth water on thought. There are some really top-notch beers in America. They just aren't at 7/11. The crappy beers are the ones everyone knows because they are made cheaply by huge companies that can afford to advertise the frick out of them. Most of the good beers don't have much at all in the way of advertisement in the US, and seem to rely mostly on word of mouth. Lots of idioms that are specific to the US. I was talking to a South African friend and casually tossed out the phrase "came out swinging" and he looked at me like I was from another planet. This obviously happens even more for non-native speakers. My German teacher told us a story about how he tried to use the phrase "the big cheese" in German. He was cleaning up the apartment he lived in because his boss was coming over. When asked why by his German roommate, he said, "Die Großkurs kommen." The German had no idea why the American was preparing for a large shipment of cheese. This may be a narrow response, but I don't think they'll ever understand the intricacies of Protestantism in the southeastern US. So many subsects, and not even over important doctrinal things. We're talking split churches over the color of the carpet, or the accepted role of the youth pastor, not to mention the sway it has over public policies. It's one of those topics that I could rant on for a few hours. A few years back my grandparents' church had a huge argument over having chairs or pews in the church. Our country rose to power in a shockingly small amount of time and was built by certain people who also rose from nothing to everything. People like Carnegie and Rockefeller. Because of this, there is a pressure on people to make it big quick and be constantly concerned with doing awesome in college so you can get that amazing career, so you can get rich, so you can get that big house and lifestyle you want. I might be wrong, but people in other countries just seem so much more content with living a smaller life, which I think is cool. College sports, especially football and to an extent basketball. I'd possibly lump that in with how people feel about their respective universities. The apparel, the home daycare, the license plates. People are really proud of where they went to school, and if their athletics program is good, then there you go. People may not realize Michigan's football stadium is the same size if not bigger than fricking Camp Nou. Why we can't make guns illegal overnight in America. Studying in Norway currently, land of the rule followers, and have met way too many friends who seem to think Americans would willfully hand guns over to government because they said so. That's hilarious. Americans are predisposed to distrust our government. The idea of trusting that one's government will do what is best if left alone is laughable over here. Suburbia. In the post-World War II baby boom and economic upswing, the US began a process of moving from cities to suburbs. Levittown was founded in 1947 outside of New York City and became the model for this kind of living. People flocked to it, particularly the affluent white people who drive American culture. Levittown itself was restricted to Caucasians. I think that many cultural differences that non-Americans are wowed by come from this period. The insulated individualism of Americans comes from selling cheap houses to individual families rather than large-scale apartment buildings. This necessitated a car culture which fed back on itself. The suburbs took over farmland, so food growing needed to be centralized in the Midwestern states. That meant long-haul trucking, which meant more paved highways and ultimately the interstate highway system, which was also a civil defense structure for when the Russians invaded. This is why so many Americans can't drive standard transmission cars, because the model here is that the majority of a commute is on the highway. Even the red plastic cup that always comes up on Reddit threads as something that fascinates tourists in the US owes itself to suburbia. When an American family wants to get together with other families, rather than go out to a public park, they'll invite everyone to one house. With so many people, it doesn't make sense to use the best dishes, cups, and flatware, so disposables are much more popular. Paris is around 1,500 miles from Moscow. Los Angeles is around 2,500 miles from New York. The reason many Americans do not have a passport or speak a foreign language is that we barely have enough time to explore our own country. What y'all in Europe call traveling to another country we call commuting to work. Taxes. They aren't included in the price tag because taxes vary depending on where you are and companies want to be able to advertise a single price across different states and cities. Non-American, but I'll chime in anyways. To you Americans, something non-Americans will never understand. Biscuits and gravy. None of us will ever understand your love of country gravy. Probably the sheer size of the country, unless you're from Russia, Canada, China, or somewhere else of comparable size. The idea that you can't drive to the Grand Canyon from New York City in a day will likely be difficult to grasp at first. Had to explain to someone at Niagara Falls that they can't see New York City from there. United States is big and a lot of areas just don't have sidewalks or managed bike lanes, so a car is very needed and in some locations a 100% necessity. Also locations are much further away. Like I am not that far from NYC, but I still need to drive one way about 45 minutes till I hit a mall to go shopping. The real sound a tornado makes as it goes over your trailer park. It doesn't sound like a freight train, more like a B-1 bomber at full afterburner. Chili, and the concept of mixing anything with it. I brought chili and fritters to make frito pie for the Austrians I visited a while back, and it absolutely blew their mind that anyone would even think of combining the two. Chili by itself was also pretty far out there for them too, but they at least tried it. When an American says I'm Irish, they are not saying I am a citizen of Ireland. Muscle cars. Going fast in a straight line developed because of the size of the country and lots of straight lines everywhere. Why is my car Camden goes wum 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 wum? Because I wanted to. We call ourselves Americans because there is no good alternative to refer to our citizens. We know that the USA is not the only country in the Americas, but what else do you want us to call ourselves? Aliens? Stations? The US Gov will prevent its citizens from having their rights violated overseas. Example, Amanda Knox. She was found guilty, then it was overturned, and she was found not guilty. She came home. Italy issued an arrest warrant for her, and the Dodge refused to comply on the grounds of double jeopardy. Can't be tried for the same crime twice. Pretty much every single British person I've met since moving to England thinks that Route 66 still exists as a whole. They don't know that only small pieces of it exist only as a tourist attraction and that you can no longer drive across the country on it. I tell them to take Interstate 70 as a replacement and they're not interested. Blows my mind. If your dirty laundry got as much international news media attention, your country would look like a bunch of arrogant, homophobic racists. 2. Apparently how much we value our individuality and autonomy, and the fact that we trust the general citizenry more than we trust our government. Why we call people African Americans and Asian Americans or any other weird thing. We are all Americans. I've never heard of an African German or Asian Englishman. Just because we use imperial units of measure does not mean we don't understand metric units. We use both regularly. You'll never get to win the World Series of baseball, even if your country plays it. Other than a couple Canadian teams, we don't invite outsiders to the World Championships. There are 50 states, not 52. Yes, I'm sure. Really, I'm sure. You're thinking of playing cards. Free refills, and not just on soda, French fries, chips, ice cream, salad greens, breadsticks, meat, if it's served. Somewhere has free refills of it. Please don't call me Yank. I'm from Louisiana and that is just insulting. I'm a NY living in the South. When I was in London and got called a Yankee, I didn't even realize it was someone referring to me as American and not as a Northerner. Just how fun a day of shooting things in the country can be. There's nothing like gathering up some old TVs, maybe an old car, a little bit of tannerite, and a few friends with their arsenals to come out and have a shootout. I don't hunt. I don't think I need a gun for protection, but dang are they fun to shoot. It's funny because that's something that even many Americans don't understand. Why we do things the way we do and get peed off when people either try to tell us what to do or say why don't you do it like other country, with zero attempt understanding our history and culture, as much as Americans get crap on for not understanding the rest of the world. Plenty of international people I've met don't know much of the US beyond the current news either. The US has distinct regional cultures in addition to a national culture. Try the regional cuisine when you come visit and don't think that all we eat are hamburger and hot dogs. I am native NYC and when I've traveled to different parts of the country I treat it like I'm visiting another country. For example, I research the local or regional specialty and then look for the best places to eat it. V8 engines and really big trucks. Big trucks with mud tires are stupid and a waste of time and money. Put person behind the wheel of a V8 mud truck. Oh crap, this is fun as frick. That there is a difference in culture, values, food, or appearance. I had someone legitimately try to tell me that someone from Boston will be exactly the same as someone from BFE Louisiana, and that person will be the same as someone from Seattle, and that person will be no different than an Amish lady from Lancaster. Those are 4 people who quite literally have nothing in common with each other. S'mores and, in a lot of places, mac and cheese. My Finnish friend had her first s'more when she was 17 and without graham crackers, so is it even a s'more? She also thought that mac and cheese was only something she imagined until she was like 15. Non-Americans of Reddit, what is a dead giveaway that somebody is American? When we talk, you are the only people who love it. Oh my god, you're Irish. I'm a naturalized American. When my family goes to the country that I was born in and go shopping, my mom wears local attire so that the merchants don't overcharge her. She was shopping one day and the merchant remarked, "Ah madam, you must have left for America 8 years ago." She was like, "How the heck did you know I was American? And how did you know I left this country 8 years ago?" It was true. It had been 8 years. Simple answer. The clothes you are wearing are 8 years out of style. So they must have been you clothes you left behind 8 years ago when you left for a different country. In Dubai at a gym, big white old man. He has that Hulk Hogan beard style and just acts tough all round, does a chest press with like 80 kgs. He always looks at me like I am some kind of a threat. I am taller than him by a foot but I am slightly overweight so I don't look nearly as scary as him. He just has that patriot look in him. Oh, and I spoke to him. He turned out to be super polite and friendly. Yes, he is actually American. From Houston, Texas. Texans are a pretty exaggerated version of Americans. Texas is to America what America is to the world. We really do mean well but in an overconfident bull in a china shop kind of way. Surprised I haven't seen this one yet. Smiling for no reason. As an American who has lived and traveled in Latin America, I know that walking down the street with a smile on my face makes me stand out like crazy. Everyone else has resting scowl face. I try to mimic that, but it cracks me up, which only makes me more smiley. Looks wise, Latin American people are pretty diverse. Even with my blue eyes, I could probably blend in, but the resting smiley face might as well be a foreigner tattoo on my forehead. Trying being an American in Russia, yours might literally be the only visible teeth for miles. We, Americans, describe distances in driving time as opposed to miles or kilometers. My European relatives always make fun of me for having no clue how far away the next town is, but knowing exactly how long it takes to get there. Well, 1 mile on I-80 in Nebraska should take less than a minute to drive, whereas 1 mile in Chicago could take all day. A little off topic, but I'm an American. I was in Italy a few years ago and an American couple stopped and asked me for directions. I gave them the information, and then the husband said, "Your English is very good. Where did you learn to speak it?" "I'm from the Midwest." So I said Minnesota. His wife asked me what I was doing in Minnesota, and I said growing up. I don't think they ever understood. They still tell the story of the young Italian who came to Minnesota to find himself and his path in life. Coming from someone who lives in the UK, enthusiasm, we don't have much of that here. Also talking to strangers and being friendly, we don't do much of that here either. They ask you what you do. Till I worked my butt off to become louder and more extroverted to survive American society when I should have just moved to Europe. I gotta say, I feel pretty good as an American. Thought this would be Fat American on repeat. They will start a conversation about anything with anyone. This can be a good thing because it's easier to socialize with an American, but out in public, on the bus, in the mall, etc., I, as the archetypical Dane that I am, usually just want to keep to myself. Foreigners think all Americans are extroverts because those are the ones who travel and talk to people. Can confirm. Silent American traveler. No one notices me. I'm too short to be seen and too quiet, and lurking in the shadows. My dad, American, just got back from China. He said people flocked to him like a D-list celebrity because he had facial hair. He never met another person there with it. Ladies would bring their babies up to him to touch his face. Being manly and polite and calling you sir. Americans make great tourists because they're generally looking for fun and not afraid to spend money. I did call my bartender sir when I ordered a Guinness in Glasgow. He said, "Don't call me sir. Call me what everyone else calls me." Canadian here. The dead giveaway is when they call me honey or sweetie or darling. I freaking love Americans and I love those terms of endearment. Another Canadian here. When I went to South Carolina with my so a few years ago, all the big colored ladies we dealt with were constantly calling us that. It was so cool. They seemed very motherly. It was very welcoming. I was surprised at how warmly Southerners treated us despite us being obviously foreign tourists. North Face jackets. I went to college in the US. I'm not American. And when I went home for my first winter break wearing my brand new North Face jacket, my friend asked me if I was given American citizenship with the purchase. On campus in South Africa, the female US exchange student's uniform. Tiny shorts, regardless of body shape, hidden socks and trainers, hoodie, usually branded America College variety, backpack, hair tied up and a water bottle, can be found frequenting coffee shops with free Wi-Fi. I think you just nailed most American college campuses. Spot on. MMDDYYYY. In Norway, Scandinavia, it's pretty obvious due to the fact that they will talk to you regardless of you knowing each other prior. This is pretty unheard of up here. We like our personal spheres. I was like, oh my god, it seems to carry 4 miles. That and baseball hats. But like, being surprised about the topless models on page 3. You try growing up with nothing but a Sears catalog to jerk off to and then not get excited at boobies in the newspaper. I'm English, but I've lived here for 14 years. It's pretty obvious just from your demeanor. Americans generally are more confident in the way they present themselves. Most other countries tend to be more reserved. Walk into a room full of different nationalities. I guarantee the American person will be the first to introduce themselves. It's a confidence thing, and I admire it. That was a nice thing for you to say, colon. So I've been living in Germany for 10 years. Before that I lived the other 10 years in America, so I'm bilingual, even though my English isn't perfectly fluent anymore and I have a slight German accent that only Americans notice. So I was working at a convention and this American guy starts talking to me, and I'm having a very good time, as I rarely get the opportunity to speak English with an American. So I tell him that I'm actually from America, assuming he heard the different accent, and he says, I know. Of course I ask how and he answers, because Europeans say but Americans, like you, say kinda blew my mind. Guy wanted to send me American candy. I'm a sucker for American candy. I work with about 5 Americans and right now I am playing conversations I have had with them in my mind and they all say this is amazing and I will be telling them tomorrow. My wife is a redhead, and during our vacation in Ireland she was constantly stopped for directions, usually by Eastern European tourists. As soon as she started talking the other tourists would hear her American accent, realize their mistake and politely move on. I guess maybe she didn't look American enough. She really melted the brains of some Spaniards on the Guinness tour when she busted out her fluent Spanish. I was in London at a pizza place. Group of Germans singing in the corner and the American couple next to us says, I can't understand their English accents. They might as well be speaking German. As a German constantly worried about his sounding very German when talking the English, this made me laugh so hard. Well, not on the spot, but usually, when I learn someone is from America I suddenly understand why that person was so nice and extrovert. American tourists in their 50s are always dressed like oversized toddlers. Shorts, t-shirt, white socks and sneakers. Sometimes even a cap. Both men and women. What if we told you that we dress our toddlers like tiny middle-aged men? Speaking as a former barman, or bartender as American customers would say, tipping. No British person will ever tip a barman. I'll occasionally get bought a drink by drunk ladies or gents, but Brits actually giving me money for doing a job that I was already being paid for? Never happened. I would listen for American accents, which were easy to hear due to their natural loudness, and immediately serve them next. And immediately serve them next. See, tipping works. Guys, I understand the effect of more people tipping, and I know I'm very thoroughly aware of what it stands for now. You do not need to reiterate this any further. My inbox and I thank you. Asians tend to herd together for safety. I think there might be other ways to tell who the Asians are. Cheers. When I was visiting Germany in college, a girl said to me, do you know how I know you're an American? You wear white socks. Needless to say, I haven't worn white socks since. Dead giveaway. They're surprised we can drink a beer, or any alcohol, in public in my country. Fair enough. I went to Spain and people were just walking around, drinking wine, and I immediately thought open container laws, you guys. Holy crap. But then I realized I wasn't in Kansas anymore. Not that I'd actually started there. It's just an expression. European here. Anyhow, I don't really think that there's a dead giveaway for somebody's nationality from afar. Or maybe I'm just fashion ignorant. Yeah, I'm definitely ignorant. Now that I look at my clothes. In general, most people from the US are outgoing. Not the same thing as friendly. But again, most of the time Americans are friendlier than others. I would also claim more enthusiastic. From my personal point of view, being loud is definitely not an American exclusive. I mean, after you spend a few minutes with 10 plus Spanish students on a bus, you'd also think that they're loud. But whatever, maybe I just think that groups of tourists, from any country, are loud, in general. The accent. Saying aluminum instead of aluminium. Wearing shorts in Britain. Cameras round their hips. You can hear them from 2 meters away. They're smiling in Britain. They're laughing in Britain. They're having conversations with strangers in Britain. They're not afraid to stick out like a sore thumb in Britain. After reading all of these comments, I feel like every other country is just walking around in their high fashion hating life. And Americans are just chilling in their Crocs and white socks, getting drunk and tipping everyone. Americans are polite and nice. In every other thread, Americans are selfish pricks. As an American, expected to see rude and obnoxious, but I'll settle for loud. We've made progress yet. Incredibly loud but incredibly friendly. My girlfriend is German, and she's always yelling at me for speaking too loud on the street. Also the train. I'm usually quiet on the bus or train, but it's almost like a library in Europe. They get upset if you call them a C as a manner of greeting them. I asked my wife, Japanese, she said in Japan I can spot Americans by the way they dress. Compared to Europeans, Americans tend to lack fashion sense. I'm American, so I can't answer. When I went to Japan, I noticed that adult Japanese men don't wear jeans or other casual clothes in public, ever. You see boys up to high school age in jeans, and then it's slacks and suits. All Americans are Texans from Boston. I worked in tourist restaurants in Old Town Quebec City and we got a lot of tourists from all over the world. Americans had a positive reputation amongst the staff. Good tippers and generally friendly, although often loud and sometimes a bit ignorant. We had a lot of Chineses who couldn't speak neither French nor English and who had a fascination with fresh oven bread. We used to serve about one bread per 2 person before the main course, but these guys would often eat 2 or even 3 per person. It was insane. Also the most dirty groups we had were Koreans. These guys can't keep a table, nor the ground around it, clean. Russians tourists are friendly but quiet and they want a lot of cream with their coffee. Japanese groups were the most civilized people I've ever seen. Quiet, clean, you could hear a bee fly in the room of 80+ person when they're eating. And finally the most hated were probably Europeans, mostly French from France, who came to visit the lowly former colony, didn't tip and lectured you about how everything is better in France and that their accent is the only way to speak French. His language, accent, also outgoing, friendly. I was stationed in Germany for a couple of years in the army. My mom and dad came to visit for a couple of weeks. Drove 3 hours to Frankfurt to wait for them at the airport. Big ol' American dude walks up to me and says, "Anschulegen, whoa, ist, der, Anflug." I glance around, quietly saying, "Departures, departures, deeper oh, right over there. See the sign with the plane taking off? Departures is down that hallway." "Oh, your English is very good, thanks. I'm from Maine." Almost, number, accent, right. Speech therapy for 5 years because my mom is from Kentucky. You can stop the hesitating and loud talking. "Oh, thank you very much. Right on, dude." As a Canadian, I don't understand why so many Americans are against social health care. Your taxes go towards roads you don't drive on, schools you don't attend, wars you oppose. Why are you so afraid of it? As a Canadian living in the States, the one thing I have noticed is that Americans have a greater sense of personal freedom. Not that we don't have that in Canada, but we are more willing to say yeah that takes away some of my freedom to choose etc. But it's better for everyone this way, as a whole, and often in subtle ways. Americans are much more attached to the concept that they don't want anyone telling them what to do. It's the same thing with gun control. The average Canadian sees less of a problem with restrictions on guns than the average Americans do. The whole population of the US is shifted right in this regard. Again, it's not necessarily that we think that it's not restricting our freedom in Canada, but we are, again in general, more likely to accept that restriction as part of the greater good. Both are fine strategies unless they are pushed too far. I didn't realize personal values and whatnot were that different. Thanks. If Americans were happy with taxes, they'd still be British. Not quite on the head. We didn't care about the taxes. We cared that we didn't representation in the British law system. No taxation without representation was a revolutionary cry. I'm a right-winger, yes, but I'd be more than willing to have a tax taken out of my paycheck to get free healthcare. That's better than thousands or even hundreds of thousands being stacked on me. As a journeyman welder in Canada, with all the money I make, I pay around 40% of my paycheck. My best friend was diagnosed with lymphoma about a year ago, and sadly, he passed away in May. The amount of treatment he went through over his 7-month battle is staggering. At one point, he was taking 4 of these pills a day that were $700 each. Never mind all the tests, chemotherapy and the other drugs. He's dead, and his family would be paying off their debt for the rest of their life. This was my best friend, and there's thousands of Canadians going through it right now. My taxes, amongst a staggering amount of bulls, pay for our healthcare, and I'm dang proud. Not once in my life has the thought of money even surfaced when I've been sick. Never. I feel the same way. I always think of it as today it might be you, but tomorrow it could be me. It doesn't bother me one bit to pay the taxes. I'm a Canadian traveling through the US for the next few months. A few things I've noticed. 1. Many people do not know how socialized healthcare works. I recently had a conversation that basically involved me repeating myself on various points. Finally, I just stated, I have never used, thought of, or in any way considered money when going to a hospital or seeing a doctor. No money ever. 2. They don't realize that socialized healthcare is actually cheaper, or should I say that they pay for a person's emergency healthcare regardless of what system is in place. The more expensive costs, ironically, would be avoided by a system where money is not an object as preventative medicine is the focus and money is not an impediment to care. For example, getting a mole removed is much cheaper than having someone stagger into the emergency room with an advanced cancer. If you need proof of this, check the percentage of GDP the US pays for healthcare compared to Canada. 3. Sadly, many people here seem to not want people to have healthcare who did not pay for it. I am traveling through the South and have seen this a lot. They will pay more money and receive less care to keep the freeloaders out in the cold. People fail to grasp just how much our current system is costing us. I am Canadian and I've been to the US a few times. This is a loose quote I heard a few years ago from an American. I worked hard all my life and I should have priority over some bum who hasn't worked an honest day in his life. Although I disagree with him, I see where his logic stands. You're on Reddit, which means that the only possible answer to that question is because conservatives hate black people. Unfortunately, I don't have faith in the government to run it efficiently. I fear ballooning costs would raise taxes. Here in Australia, our taxes have been steadily dropping over the last few years, and we're about to be one of the first in the world to receive federally funded dental benefits. A friend of mine recently had a knee reconstruction, all on the public dollar, within a month and a half. We were in surplus till 2008, and now in debt, but we're still lowering taxes, and that debt is to be paid in a few years. I don't see the problem. To be fair, Australia is fairly unique in the fact that we have a ridiculous amount of natural resources and almost never-ending demand from China to draw on for economic stimulus. That said, I do think that social healthcare is the way to go, but I think that there could be a number of problems in scaling it up to a population of 300 million. Just an aside, but many countries that have socialized Medicare vehemently opposed it before it was enacted, Canada included. I feel this is mostly a lack of information mixed with propaganda from lobby groups that were hurt during the transformation. Once gotten, however, no one wants to repeal it. Sure, you'll hear things about two-tiered systems, etc., but at some point either we or someone we know will get sick and not lose their shirt over it, and the taxes that replace high insurance premiums seem like a reasonable exchange. I think the fight to keep America's system as is will be quite something. Obamacare has barely begun and already the pre-existing issues and staying on parental insurance until 26 are very important to most voters on both sides. No one wants to repeal it though. Even Tommy Douglas, father of Canada's socialized healthcare, was recently voted to be the greatest Canadian of all time. I am for improving the system, like Obamacare does, but it's not quite so easy as just throwing together some legislation and making visits to the hospital free. First difference between Canada and the United States is that people just don't think the government would do a very good job. I've heard plenty of horror stories about the VA hospital system, and public perception is that a national system would just be a total disaster. Just look at what happened when we thought about going to Metric. Love you guys up north, but we've got 10 times as many people as you do, plus the illegal population. Another question, do they get care as non-citizens? Also, you might think you cut the profits out from the system by making it government run. People save money, right? Well, in the US, we have for-profit hospitals and drug companies. Who's to say those two groups aren't going to use their lobby to suck down tax dollars? If you want to effectively nationalize, You can't stop at the insurance. Nationalizing things is not something we usually do in the US, unless it's an institution, like the rail companies or post office, that provides an profitable public service. HMOs are very profitable. Lastly, as far as the Constitution goes, one might argue via the 10th Amendment, state-sponsored healthcare is something that states must provide, not the federal government. TLDR. You are correct that part of it is the silly notion that socialism is a bad thing, but there are several practical barriers as well. Good point on the VA system. As a medical student working in both the nearby VA hospital and the large private academic hospital, it is undoubtedly true that the staff, nurses, doctors, everyone are lower caliber at the VA. I think it's mostly of the function of the fact that there is more money in the private system, so the rejects fall into the VA system where it's harder to be fired or sued. This is why I am trying to move to Canada. This is from my dad, a doc. Government payers will pay less and change the market. You can't say no to changes they make. You have to accept it. All the private companies can now do the same. Remember, a doctor is a small business owner. That's where his money comes from. Drop the price. Drop his profits. He can't haggle with single payer. Now a doctor starts working for real money at 30 or 36 if you are a heart surgeon. He has between $250k and $750k of debt, and half, exaggerated, of his job is cleaning up drunks so they can get drunk again. So for current doctors, it sucks. But for future doctors, we just avoid it. I'm ECE because my dad convinced me not to do anything medically related. I'm at a school known internationally for its BME program, and I will never touch medicine. It isn't worth it. TLDR. Less people want to be doctors already. This will make it worse. It can be done, but needs improvement. Fix malpractice and insurance. Remove single payer option. Also, less people wanting to be doctors means worse doctors. I rarely see it discussed, but there really needs to be some kind of reform in this country when it comes to the cost of medical schooling. Doctors provide such crucial functions it makes no sense they should have to start out their careers so deeply in debt. I just want to say, if you break your arm tomorrow, do you have the money to pay for it? Do you want to? If I break my arm tomorrow, I get it fixed and all the painkillers in the world, for free. I take issue with claiming it's free because it really isn't. There's a reason taxes are so high here. They make our healthcare system possible. To be fair, most people oppose road repairs for roads they don't use. Older adults whose kids are out of school consistently vote against budget increases for school districts. And anyone who's not a weapon contractor or an easily scared moron is against our pointless wars. If we have the choice between helping ourselves or others, we'll choose ourselves every single time. It might be selfish, but I'm not ashamed of it, and most people aren't ashamed of it. Heck, most Americans who support government-run programs like this are poor people who would receive more in benefits than they would pay in taxes. I can't blame them for supporting programs that would help them with other people's money. It's in their best interest. But those who can afford their own insurance will do anything to avoid paying for someone else's services. I have nothing against everyone having healthcare, but I do have an issue with government-mandated healthcare. Why should I have to pay a tax if I don't want healthcare? The biggest misconception with the argument is the mistake most often made by a statist. This misconception is the idea that confuses society with the government. This translates into a statist believing that if someone objects to something being done by the government, that person is objecting to it being done at all. So when someone says I don't want the federal government to run healthcare, a statist makes the assumption that person doesn't want people to get healthcare at all. The reality is that most people in this country are good people. People like helping other people. They like to give to charity. They like to help those that are less fortunate. But there is a big difference between volunteering that help and being forced down the barrel of a gun to surrender your money. And most statists respond to this statement with "what gun?" which is because they are so far removed from realizing the monopoly of force their government has and their willingness to use that force if you don't comply. But just ask yourself, if you don't pay your taxes, do the people who show up to your house have guns? The foundation of this country is built around the ideas of personal freedom. free association and individual liberty. These ideals have helped create the country we live in today. Most people in this country are more than willing to show compassion to individuals who are less fortunate. Most people still give to charity and volunteer their time to causes they believe in despite the fact that they pay a huge portion of their money in taxes. But getting someone to give up their money by way of force isn't compassion. It's just a form of violence justified under the mask of compassion. So to answer your question, we have a higher expectation of ourselves in this country. We aren't comfortable with the idea of using extreme violence to pay for healthcare or most things our taxes go to. We believe in the free market and the good of our fellow citizens to create innovative solutions to the issues facing our society. And we know we can accomplish those goals through free association and without the coercion through force that is required by our government. Of all the things you said government provides, roads, schools, etc., take a look at their budgets, costs, and quality of service and see if they work. They don't. They're over budget and subpar. So why would anyone want people running our current services to run any more services? Didn't cost us a penny. Yes it did. This is what I'm so upset with. The fact that everyone thinks it is free. I was born in America, have a father whom was American military. He was deployed to the first Gulf War leaving a wife and 3 young children. Shortly after he left we had a gas leak where my family including me was lucky to survive. But my mum was very ill. Having a father in the military it covered healthcare. However, because we didn't have insurance, the ambulance crew, called not by my mum but the fire DPT, tried to charge my mum $50 to drive her down the road to get to hospital. My mum refused point blank. She is British and typically gave the emergency service staff a piece of her mind eloquently in style, and didn't have the cash to give anyway. I am so very proud of the NHS and pleased that I moved to a country where everyone can be given healthcare regardless of wealth. Thank you mum for being British. I have needed to be admitted to hospital a few times in my life and they couldn't have done a better job. I was only young when the gas leak happened but it defiantly changed my opinion on my country of birth. A lot of Americans I have spoken to about it, sadly including my father and several relatives. They think that they are personally being robbed of their own money if goes to someone else less fortunate than themselves to help them have a life saved pain eased by having social health care. It's something I genuinely find shameful. Plus they say they are religious people, but obviously caring for others is only okay to the point of it not costing anything. I'm against a lot of things being run by the government, but I think there are certain things that are necessities for pretty much anyone in a modern society, which makes sense to nationalize. It's not a right, but it's also something everyone will use and pay for in some shape or form. Things like education. Having an educated workforce helps me by helping the economy. Transportation. It's important to keep up roads everywhere for a variety of reasons. And healthcare. And I generally come in as libertarian in questionnaires. These are the issues that knock my score down. Lol. Unfortunately I don't have faith in the government to run it efficiently. I fear ballooning costs would raise taxes. Look at what is happening with Social Security. If healthcare is successful and is run with a surplus, they will just borrow against it to pay down other debts. As a Canadian posting to what is already a liberal circle jerk of a site, let's be honest, you just wanted the low-hanging calmer fruit, didn't you? Taxes are too high, and a lack of trust in our federal governments to get it right. Americans who visited Europe, what was your biggest WTF moment? Had a positive what the frick moment in Greece and the Eastern Peloponnese where I saw a guy walk down to the end of a pier and throw an actual fricking trident into the Aegean and pull out a wriggling octopus. Dude walked up the beach and handed it over the deck railing to a chef. You fricking saw Poseidon? Spent a summer in Germany. They had the cleanest, safest, best tasting tap water, but nobody drank it and they called it toilet water. Also the older people in village seemed super grumpy and mean and would never smile or respond if you said hello or good morning, but if you asked them a substantive question, like how to get to the museum, They would spend 15 minutes telling you the fastest way to get there, the scenic way to get there, everything interesting you should do on the way there, why that museum isn't actually that good and you should go to this other museum, 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 other. About the water, we do drink it, but usually most people prefer sparkling water which you can buy at the shop, or you have a soda stream. Funny enough, my biggest WTF moment came from an American. We were at a restaurant in Sancterra, Italy called Trattoria del Billy. About halfway through our meal, I overheard a guy with a Tennessee Arkansas accent say, verbatim, in a frustrated tone, "You need to speak more American," to his waiter. "This isn't Rome. This isn't Venice. It's a small town called Manila. The odds of finding someone fluent in your language are drastically lowered." However, this guy was pompous enough to not only continue to berate his waiter, but then tell the manager who came around that he needs to hire someone who can speak American in a foreign country, of which he obviously speaks zero of their language. Seriously, WTF. One time in Rome, it started pouring. As I sought shelter, I saw an older man selling one single umbrella. Strange as it was, I needed that umbrella, so I haggled with him and settled on €3. He had the upper hand in that transaction. I wander over to a coffee shop to dry out for a little bit. When I go to leave, the umbrella is no longer in the bucket by the door. Upset at myself for being so trusting, I head into the rain again. Guess who I see? The same old man selling the same umbrella. I try to confront him about stealing back my umbrella, but he claims not to remember our interaction at all. It's pouring and I have a number of miles to walk, so I go through the same charade with him again to re-procure the umbrella. At least this time he took €2. That is an old scam tactic. Going to a soccer game in Italy, when buying a ticket, they needed to know which team I was rooting for to determine where I could sit. Then, during the game, people were setting things on fire. Went to Sweden on a vacation package. Stayed at a wonderful historic hotel for part of the trip that had a restaurant inside of it. Part of our package called for a free dinner at the hotel and we had asked that it be the night we arrived. We arrived and got settled in our room and then went to check out the restaurant. As soon as we walked in, there was no one there, only a hostess. She immediately said they were expecting us and we could sit anywhere. There was no one else in this gorgeous, ornate restaurant. A waiter came out and said they had prepared a special meal for us. We asked why it was so empty and he said the restaurant was closed one day a week and today was that day. We were shocked. We apologized profusely and told them that we had booked through another company and would have just scheduled it for another day. He said it was no problem and we had some free extras such as wine and dessert. The main course ended up being a huge piece of meat, which we jokingly said must have been because we were big fat Americans. No one rushed us. We had a great time, and after we left they closed the restaurant for the night. It was a total WTF moment because if you booked something like this in America, they'd either force you to reschedule or just have the restaurant closed with no explanation. Went to Dover, England and saw Mother Fricking Castle. The newest section was built like 300-400 years before my country was founded. Turned a corner and the next part was 200 years older than that. 10 minutes later walk up to a Roman lighthouse built 2000 years ago. Damn. 2000-year-old Roman column sitting half sunken in a dude's yard, and he was just mowing around it like it was an old stump. You saw a bird table. We were driving through Spain, and to the side of one of the roads, we noticed these massive birds' nests in the high-power electrical towers. They were at least twice the size of eagles' nests that I had seen, and there were so many of them. Then we saw these giant birds in them. We stopped by the side of the road and tried to take some pictures. Didn't have a great zoom lens, sadly, but no one else was stopping. It was so odd. We are accustomed to at least a few people stopping to watch the osprey, eagles, or other birds where I'm from. So a few days later, we are chatting with a German tourist, and we bring up the birds. I think she thought we were joking until we pulled out the pictures. Then she started laughing. Storks? Those are storks. Of course, don't you know that? They are everywhere and such a nuisance. Don't you have storks in America? Well, no. Then she looked confused. Well, if you don't have storks, who brings the babies in kids' stories? Storks? How does that work? And that was when we realized that the story of the storks makes a whole lot more sense when storks are nesting on every chimney, tree, or tall place. When I visited Prague and water cost 2 crowns and beer cost 1. My uncle went to the Philippines and a double whiskey and coke cost less than a single, because whiskey is cheaper than coke. Every meal in Paris taking 3 hours. I loved the culture and I'm all about eating a relaxing meal, but sometimes it was just like WTF when we were on a schedule and had to meet up with a tour group or had reservations for something. Try getting your bill when you're in a hurry. Impossible. Feeling proud of myself for eating late, like a local, at 2100 hours in Lisbon only to walk into a empty restaurant. By the time I'd finished eating at 2200 hours the place was full. That's only Southern Europe, though. Here in Germany it's more like 1820.00. A normal, not bar or snack fast food like restaurant will likely close at 22:23.00 and close the kitchen about an hour or so earlier. I was in Scotland this summer and in Edinburgh I asked someone for directions. They told me just go past the Tron in a very thick accent. Though she was saying train except while walking to the train I saw earlier I noticed a bar called the Tron. In UK, we navigate by pubs. My American friends who visited the Netherlands, completely surprised by our bicycle things. So many bicycles everywhere. B. Everybody riding without a helmet. C. So many different bicycles. While in Amsterdam 2 years ago, saw a woman with 2 kids and the wheelbarrow contraption at the front of her bike, and a baby strapped to her seat behind her, not a helmet in sight. If she tried that in Toronto, city councillors' heads would explode en masse. I was a military brat living in Belgium when I saw a commercial on AFN, Armed Forces Network, that gave new arrivals to Europe a quick rundown of things. The one thing I learned and that has stuck with me is, no right turn on red. For me it was a lack of insects in England. Not that they don't exist, but I'm from Michigan with lots of swampy land around me. When I showed up at my dorm and saw there was no screen on my window I was just thinking about all of the bugs that are gonna get in my room. I got one fly the entire month stay there. Yeah, if you leave your window open at night with the lights on you might get a couple of moths and the occasional spider, but we're really lucky with our relative lack of biting insects and flies. It was subtle at first, but it eventually boggled my mind how old everything was and it was still integrated into everyday life. Like in the UK, drinking in pub that had been in the same spot since the 11th century, or eating dinner at restaurant in an 18th cathedral, or in Prague going to club in a 14th century stone cellar or staying a hotel brewery that had been operating since the 15th century. The oldest building in my vicinity is from the 1750s, which is prehistoric by US standards. But, like, someone in Europe sees a building that is half a millennia old that no one is using and they're like, let's turn this into a disco. I loved it. I live in England and the village near me has a pub from the early 1700s that's seen as modern because the village itself and the surrounding buildings and other pub is from the pre-Doomsday Book era, 1086. I forget sometimes just how old this country is. I lived in Germany for 8 years from 1992 to 2000, ages 4-12. I didn't realize it until I moved back to the States, but there were recycling bins on every street corner. It wasn't just a green bin then a trash can, it was a giant blue bin. One section for green glass, one for brown glass, one for clear glass, one for plastic, and one for paper. Oh, and going to a German school, students took public transit. There wasn't such a thing as a school bus. Beer tap in the uni cafeteria. Drinking one beer with your lunch from time to time is not considered special at all in Germany. Drinking 2 beers every day for lunch makes you an alcoholic. How easy and unencumbered by useless bulls most things are. Getting on a 5:30 train from Brussels to Berlin, show up at 5:20, and get laughed at by the Germans who will finish their beer at exactly 5:28 because they know the walk from the bar to the platform is 1 minute and 57 seconds. In the States that would require showing up at 3:15 because of at least 4 security checkpoints and 8 lines of people who can't figure out how an escalator works. At a lake retreat in Germany, kids playing in around the lake naked. In Amsterdam I saw a guy get jacked in the head with a bottle, take 2 steps back and then pass out. All his friends scattered. Then the 2 old men shop owners were like, lol, kids, am I right? I am from the NYNJ area and have seen firsthand how out of control sporting events can get. Guys, mostly, getting drunk, vandalizing property, throwing cans and bottles, fighting, etc. So when a group of friends went to Germany for Oktoberfest some years ago, we also wanted to see a football, soccer, game. So we got tickets to see Bayern Munich versus some other German team in what, I think, was a meaningful game. We went more for the experience versus being huge fans. Game is great. I think the score was 5-1, so lots of action. The energy in the stadium was undeniable. Fans singing, jumping around, yelling for the entire game. Game ends. Munich wins. Begin the march to the subway station. Virtually an entire stadium, it seemed, exited to go to this one nearest subway stop. There are 4, maybe 5 cops standing at the entrance steps. Oh, this is going to be a huge problem. Thousands of people, lots of them intoxicated, heading toward these 5 cops at this one exit. It's going to be a disaster. Some guys start pee on a fence within their view. What are they doing? And then, as we watched nervously, the crowd reached the cops and just stopped. Everyone stopped. No one fought. The guys pee finished up their business, zipped up and joined the queue. Cops let enough people by to fill the first train. Then the rest stopped, and so on and so forth until our group went. It was incredible. That scene couldn't happen in America. Maybe this was an anomaly, but picturing an event at MSG, there's an army of state troopers to keep order, in addition to local cops, undercover cops, event security, etc. And brawls and things still erupt with regularity. This was amazing to us. We still talk about it years later. That was some respectful, organized and orderly crap. The urinal type things in Amsterdam were interesting. Also the way English people say urinal. Paying to use a public restroom. I get why though. Just a horrible feeling if you really had to go and you don't have any change. Every night in Spain, around 3 AM, this massive fleet of street scrubbers, vacuum mobiles, and water hoses appeared and cleaned the entire city for about an hour. It was like 100 people every night just cleaning the city. The following morning, all of Salamanca was spotless. That crap was magical. Salamanca is beautiful. This is the best bratwurst I've ever had, and this is an airport. Cologne train station bratwurst takes some beating too. 1. I went to the Netherlands for a music festival over the summer last year. The night before I went to a show and met a Scottish guy who came over and said, "You look American." I replied yes and he immediately started talking about American politics and the military. It was weird how he assumed I was completely knowledgeable about all upper level government doings, but otherwise was a chill dude. 2. The fact that there's no AC. I didn't realize it wasn't standard and was melting in my hotel room. 3. How uncommon asking for ice is. I've never gotten stranger looks when I would ask for a drink with some ice. One person at the festival had to confirm she understood me lol. I stayed with the family in France for a week. The first thing the son did when I got there was to show me their American refrigerator. I was confused at first because it was a Samsung, but what he really meant was it had an ice machine. He was so proud to have it. I was happy to have ice for the first time in 2 months. In Scotland there was a bomb threat at a local gas station. The news anchor that was covering it interviewed locals about how they felt about this terrifying event. Every response fell along the lines of, "I don't know much about that, but I'm sure the government is taking care of it." Back to my day. The faith in the government and not wanting to button blew my mind. I was in Italy and wanted to grab a bite and a beer for some lunch. I left the flat and I was flabbergasted to find the entire town was empty. Everything was closed. Not even the neighborhood dogs were around. Lived in Italy for 3 years. Definitely took a while to adjust to this though. And you also learn the specific times for places you want to visit since they all close midday for a few hours. In Italy there is virtually no threshold for how much distance should be left between a speeding car and any obstacles, including pedestrians. It is zooming past. A bus driver will rush down a narrow cobblestone street with about a centimeter to spare between the sides of the bus and any parked cars, walls, ancient monuments, or playing children. At a pedestrian crossing in Italy, if you approach cautiously and hesitate waiting for cars to slow down for you, you'll get nowhere. You have to just walk out there like you own it and then they stop. The scooters just drive around you. The locals know this and barely even look before crossing, but it's scary as crap for tourists. I was in Spain as an exchange student. I had bronchitis after the flight. My host family took me to the OR, which gave me a pill that eliminated the illness entirely under 2 days. I slept, woke up 100% better. It was banned in the USA. I wish I could recall its name. In Spain, everyone appears to be very thin, yet I swear eats a loaf of bread a day. The Spanish are quite active. Even the elderly will go for their evening strolls. I love Spain. When I visited the hospital and had x-rays done, spoke with 2 doctors and was triaged by a nurse, all with no health insurance, and my total bill was 24 euros. Then I had to pay 10 additional euros for some painkillers, again with no insurance or anything. I will never understand Americans being so opposed to universal healthcare. The fact I can pay a few quid a month into the NHS and not worry about choosing between getting food or getting treated for an illness is one of the best things we've ever done in the UK. Not American, but Canadian. First time I went to Ireland, I go through customs and the agent says to me, "Business or personal?" "Personal." "Oh yeah, what's up?" "Visiting the in-laws." "First time in Ireland?" "Yes sir." "Feckin' A. Well, why ya standing around? Go get pee." "What part of Ireland were you visiting?" Seeing an elderly Chinese tourist pull down her grandkid's pants so he can take a crap on the sidewalk. It was in the entrance of Disneyland in Paris. Google spot the mainlander. Germany, went on a road trip to Hamburg with my friend and her parents in their tiny little car. Dad drove us to the red light district and insisted that we go check it out. Left his wife and 25-year-old daughter in the back seat to ogle H through the glass. WTF, Hans? In Venice I saw someone's dog poop in front of 2 900-year-old churches and then they didn't even bother to pick it up. One poop equals one respect. Went to Spain. They weren't speaking Spanish. I learned that Catalan existed. This was years ago. And Galician and Basque. So 4 proper languages, including Castellano Spanish, and a lot of dialects on top. I went to Portugal and Greece and they offer beer at McDonald's. Awesome. And I'm not talking about a no paper cup, I mean a glass of beer. I was in Spain and I saw a group of American tourists wearing sombreros. I once saw a reality TV show where a family visited Japan and the dad kept saying gracias to everyone. His daughter explained that her dad's default is to speak in Spanish to any foreigner. Not even good Spanish, just basic words like a tourist talking to someone in South America. At pubs in England, youngish guys drinking bottles of Budweiser. People walking around drunk and nobody doing anything. Like we're just going to leave this person blackout drunk on the side of the walkway? The littering in a lot of places really blew me away, especially France. Part of this is due to the amount European smoke, I guess, because at times in Paris the cobblestone felt paved with cigarette butts. The quality of your fast food surprised me. Everything from the street vendors to chain fast food like McDonald's was better quality than anything I'd gotten in Canada. The people at every tourist site trying to sell you their crap was new to me. Knew it was coming but was still surprised by how widespread it was. Really took me by surprise when I saw some of them pulling their water bottles that they sell out of the sewers in the morning, though it makes sense in hindsight. Prague was even cheaper than what I had been told. Was great to be eating like a king without spending much, which was refreshing after some of the more expensive countries. Munich blew me away by how well culture and modernization were integrated. Definitely my pick for city I wanted to live in the most. I lived in Spain for 9 months at one point and was trying to get to the supermarket in the middle of a weekday and the entire city center was blocked off. I had to park and walk a ways and discovered that they were having a giant block party, kegs and all, around noon, celebrating the town's new garbage trucks. I love Spain. Public urination is not uncommon. We might still get fined if a police officer happens to be around and you're pee on a building or something. It's only a fine though. You're not going to be put on a craxical list like some people in the US have been put on, apparently. Americans of Reddit, what were the biggest culture shocks you experienced when in Europe? People handle alcohol well. There are no cops. EU friend comes to America, tries to drink beer on bus. Cops get involved. Can't drink on the bus in London anymore. Difference in personal space. I went to Spain for a study abroad and the amount of physical space between me and other people made me extremely uncomfortable at first. Can feel you in my bubble. You should come to Sweden. After a while you'd be longing for someone to enter your space. Haha. I lived in Belgium for a year. The thing that most surprised me was the bureaucracy. Want to transfer classes in America? You log onto the school's website from your apartment, spend 5 minutes filling out an online form and you're done. In Belgium, bring 3 copies of Form A to the registrar's office. On one side of campus if your last name starts with AK, the other if it starts with KZ. And make sure you bring a passport size photo. They will give you 2 copies of Form B. Fill it out, bring it to the office of the department in question. 2 trips if the classes are in different departments. Then get Form C signed by both professors. Bring that back to the registrar. And compounding things, a lot of these offices are only open a few hours a day a few days of the week, and not necessarily at the same time, which makes this a multi-day process. Getting transit passes, registering a change of address, basically anything that involves any branch of the public administration was a similar pain in the ass. It's obviously an oversimplification to say America is freer than Belgium, but life over there can sometimes feel very regimented. The Fanta. I'm guessing you didn't go to Paris, then. I was surprised that French people were so freaking nice to me. I am wandering around their country without knowing a single word of French, and every time I needed help a random old French man would help me. As someone on the bus to Prague from Vienna at this moment, it's nice. Probably the time I went to an American restaurant in Germany and everyone ate their burgers with forks and knives. Haha, reminds me of the time I went to KFC in Vietnam and they were eating fried chicken with knives and forks, as though they've heard somewhere that Westerners eat with knives and forks, not dissimilar to the Asians use chopsticks mantra, and decided to just go along with it. A Greek restaurant owner literally stuck a meatball in my mouth. I tasted thumb. Really nice guy. He didn't seem to think anything of it. The meatball was really good though. Could have been the taste of his thumb I suppose. But I ordered a few meatballs and wrote down his store's name so I could visit again if I ever return to Athens. I consider this culture shock because I have since come to assume that all Greeks are comfortable putting their thumbs in your mouth. Could have been the taste of his thumb I suppose. Greek thumb is quite the delicacy. So much smoking. Why is it always about Americans? I'm Australian. I've traveled to Europe. Here me. I'm from South Carolina. A friend and I were having lunch in London during our trek through Europe and noticed a lot of business women with facial piercings. I'm talking full business pantsuit and lip nose rings. You just don't see that down here. Oh, and the 2 women having a meeting at the table beside us said frick about every 4th word. People not being so uptight about everything. I lived in Italy for a few years in the early 90s and also traveled to Germany a fair bit during that time, and all the various European folks, Italians and Germans, mostly, but also some Brits, Poles, etc. My family and I met were just totally free and chill about everything. Mom died, she was lovely, I'll weep, but that's life. Car got stolen, it's only a short walk to work anyway, the cops will sort it out soon enough. I was fairly young back then, but heard that kind of stuff be treated like it was the little end of the world, so I was kind of blown away by people not having a frickin' conniption 40 or 50 times a year. I don't know if it's just a heck of a coincidence or what, but I've noticed since we got back to the States in 1995 that all of my friends who either A. have spent time in Europe outside the US, in general, or B. are not from the US, in the first place are able to handle life with about a million times less stress than my friends who were born here and have never left. I will answer the other way around. I'm French, And the biggest culture shock I had when I went to the USNY and NJ was the fact that some people were terrified of strangers. We had a rental car and were trying to go to one place we couldn't find on the map. In Europe it's quite common to stop your car by the sidewalk and ask pedestrians, but in America people were freaking afraid of approaching. I was like 14, not on the driver's seat obviously, at the time, and people wouldn't come help me. I remember a woman telling me, "Sorry, I won't come near you, sweetie." Well, it was either fear or disgust of my French stench, I guess. People in Europe were better at speaking at English than I was at speaking their language. In 3 different countries, people stopped me from trying to speak their language and just spoke to me in English. Looking back, it is highly possible that my English, and not my German, actually improved when I visited Germany. It was fascinating. Restaurants are only open for lunch, then dinner, and are closed in between. In France we showed up to a restaurant at 1 PM and they said they couldn't serve us. We just bought some snacks and had a large dinner, so not a big deal. Being from the San Francisco Bay Area, I'm just used to restaurants staying open all day. The fact that people really do react negatively to you being from America. I went to Germany while Bush was president. At one of the bars a girl my age berated my friend and I about Bush for a solid 30 minutes. Despite the fact that neither my friend nor I voted for him, nor did Bush even win Minnesota's electoral vote. She couldn't get it through her head we didn't like Bush either. Germany, they leave the milk out at meals and it gets warm. Warm beer. Teenagers drink, but are mostly responsible about it. Blutwurst, sausage made of blood. It is morally offensive to pass on the right on the autobahn. Saw one car do this. You'd think he kicked a puppy. Denmark, unhealthy fascination with fish. I asked a guy what a good Danish gift I could get my wife would be. He recommended herring. People take leaves of absence from their jobs for months at a time. They return to their old jobs like nothing happened. Scotland. I knew they were speaking English, but I couldn't understand them. Of the dozen or so countries I've been to, this is only place that happened. Europe in general. People have a disdain for Americans, except for the ones they have actually met. I had to explain more than once that movies and TV do not equal reality. Practically everybody speaks English. They are shocked when you speak their language. The Danes don't even want you to try. The shops close at 5 PM. Seriously? It is morally offensive to pass on the right on the autobahn. Saw one car do this. You'd think he kicked a puppy. It's actually illegal and against the law to pass on the right, primarily due to the missing speed limit. Warm beer. That's not a common thing here. They put mayonnaise on French fries in Holland, and in the movie theaters you can buy a glass of beer. Can I point out that we Dutch have the better version of mayonnaise, not the dribble you can get across the Atlantic Ocean. I've tried it a couple of times abroad, but it's way too sour. Our version is more sweet. The food is really good. Everywhere I went the food was great. While I was living in Spain, I frequently stopped at a truck stop on the way home from Sevilla because it was awesome. Also, people seem to have a much smaller comfort zone. When I was in Germany, I was really impressed by how bakeries seem to be ubiquitous. Not that my homeland of Canada has no bakeries, but it was nowhere near the level in Germany. The distinction was certainly a good one though. Everywhere I went, some sort of currency had to be exchanged for a trip to the restroom. Whether it was paying for the public one under the Louvre or just having to buy a drink at a cafe in order to use their toilet, I didn't dare to use the ones on the sidewalk. You can't really talk about Europe as if it was a single country. Europe is a chaos of countries, and we're all different. How nice everyone was. Paying to use a restroom and outdoor urinals. No convenience stores. Well, they were different the whole shopping experience. Everything is small. The cars are small. The roads are small. The food portions are small. Even the trees are kinda small. This is completely inverted in Munich. Even the pillows are huge. Whose head is even that big? Also, the scenery and buildings outside the window from the train seriously looked like all the classical paintings and postcards. It was really beautiful, and especially in Germany the trains were A+ amazing and everything was so clean. The hatred some people had towards me just because I'm American. That all, not all, but a lot of them spoke perfect English. Those freaking travel dictionaries were practically useless. Sorry. I'd say the beer in the hotel lobby's vending machine was my example. So chill about it. Same was at my university. Super cheap cold beer in a vending machine. I've lived in Paris and Bordeaux for a couple of years, so they refers to French, especially Parisian. Two things. 1. Hierarchy. It's everywhere, particularly among the bourgeoisie. It's in how people look at you in the metro, how people talk about others, the formality of certain greetings and meetings, the relationships between myself and my students, and how I address the director, the way immigrants are viewed, particularly those of different races, almost without exception, how many people you need to talk to get anything done, aka bureaucracy. In my friends' relationships, we have hierarchies in the US as well, but they are much less rigid and with many more exceptions. 2. Their online banking is terrible. Seriously guys. 21st century. Everyone in Paris smokes everywhere. I was still smoking then and was thrilled to be able to light up anywhere I was, including in a restaurant. Horse in the meat section at the grocery. The public transportation. Here, if you don't have a car, you're fricked. You either walk 15-30 miles or pay a friend to drive you. In the 3 weeks I spent in Europe, Paris, Versailles, Brussels, Bruges, Amsterdam, I didn't ride in a car once. The public transportation infrastructure was efficient and universally available. Plus, everything was so close together. If I didn't feel like taking the metro, I could walk. I remember, just for the fun of it, walking from Central to Leidseplein in Amsterdam, which, after looking at a map, seemed to be a good chunk of the distance across the city. The city I live near, not in, but near, takes 30 minutes to drive across on the interstate at 70 miles per hour, 112 kilometers per hour. Nothing is within walking distance. We have buses, but they're horribly inefficient and only come every 30 minutes to 1 hour, depending on the route. We have no commuter rail of any kind, no subway, no tram, nothing. The only way to get from the town I live into the city is to either drive, slip a friend with a car $10, or pay a cab $50 or so. I love the public transit. I would gladly sell my car, buy a rail pass, and take the metro every day if it was an option. I could buy a rail pass for the entire year for what I pay for my car in a month, and not have to deal with traffic. Canadian here. I think getting used to Dutch people kissing me 3 times each was a little hard at first. I'm not that close with others here, so when I visit I get bombarded with at least 5 people kissing me like crazy when I walk in the door. In some countries it's 2 times, or 4. In some countries it's only when one the people meeting is a woman. In others it's everyone. In some countries it's only close friends. In other it's everyone. In some countries they just don't kiss one another. When people from different parts of Europe have to greet each other it's always a minfuck. I was in Northern Ireland as an exchange student in the 90s. They close everything down. Stores, restaurants, everything for bank holidays. There are tons of bank holidays, and nobody even knows what the holiday is. That people don't sit on the floors. Like right now I'm sitting on the floor with my computer on the couch. When I moved to Poland the family I was staying with looked at me like some kind of barbarian. There are a lot of fat people in the UK, not as many morbidly obese, but tons of chubbies, and no one refrigerates their drinks, soda, juice, unless necessary, which was annoying. Most of the music TV was American. Roads, parks, bike paths are 1,000 times nicer. Very few homeless people, excluding London area, and contrary to popular belief, the food is freaking amazing. No one refrigerates their drinks, soda, juice, unless necessary. In my experience, juice, yes, soda, before using if possible. A lot of us have really tiny fridges though, so that might be why it gets kept out. The lack of registers in supermarkets. I was in a fairly big supermarket in Germany once and I was surprised how there were only 5 registers at the end. It's really mind-baffling how they can get things done at all. No free refills. Fucking commies. One of the Burger Putin's Burger Kings in my town just got free refills. That actually was a huge shock. And to think you filthy capitalist fatcats Americans are so used to it. Looks like the glorious Soviet Union Russia is finally getting some freedom. Paying to use a bathroom. I'm already spending money eating at your establishment. Now you want me to pay more to take a pee? My natural bodily functions should not cost money. What if someone has a disease that makes them have to go a lot? It seems unfair. I agree, but I just usually walk past the attendants. I see it as a donation rather than a proper payment. Sure, these poor people have to clean the toilets to make a living, but the restaurant should have to pay them a fair wage. That cars didn't stop for pedestrians and gypsies, especially gypsy kids. I was in Greece for 3 weeks last summer. Also, whenever a local found out I was from Canada they would speak French. This is Kato of Power. If you subscribe, your power level will increase by 64 levels. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check out another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.